This emotional journey reflects the power of healing, forgiveness, and the strength of family bonds. It tells the story of a mother who, after years of struggle and conflict, learns to heal from the past and rebuild her relationship with her son and daughter-in-law. Over time, they all discover that family is not perfect, but it is resilient, capable of growth, and full of love. Through small moments of joy, shared memories, and the everyday acts of support, they find peace and strength together, learning that the true beauty of family lies in the connections we create, no matter the challenges we face. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. If you believe in the power of family, healing, and second chances, subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories that will inspire and move you. Together, we can spread positivity and remind the world of the importance of love, forgiveness, and the beauty of growing together. I never imagined I would have to remind my own child about the signature on a mortgage document, but there I was, 58 years old, with a broken hip, watching James and Rachel redesign my bedroom into a nursery, explaining why I should be grateful for the assisted living facility they had chosen for me. Life has a way of showing you exactly who people are when you're no longer useful to them. Before we dive back into the story, tell me where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, don't forget to subscribe to my channel because I have something special for you tomorrow. I'm Emily Johnson, although everyone still calls me Emily since I was a little girl. I've lived in the old house in Mapleton, Pennsylvania for nearly 30 years now. It's not as fancy as today's standards. The kitchen cupboards are outdated, and the backyard could use a fresh coat of paint, but it's my home. At least, that's what I thought. I grew up just outside of Pittsburgh, the daughter of a steelworker and a seamstress. My parents taught me two things that I've held on to throughout my life. Hard work is the only money that's worth anything, and family comes first. Those lessons became the foundation for everything I did, especially when I became a mother. I met David while I was working as an administrative assistant at Westbrook Manufacturing in my second year. He was an engineer, smart with numbers, but awkward with people. We got married 6 months after we first met, and James was born 2 years later. The early years of our family's life were like a dream. David's career took off, I raised James, and worked part-time to cover the bills. We saved every penny for a down payment to buy a house in Mapleton, choosing the neighborhood for its good school district. When James was 7, David began suffering from severe headaches. At first, we thought it was just migraines, but when the doctor discovered a brain tumor, it was already too late. 8 months after the diagnosis, I became a widow at 36, with James only 8 years old and not understanding why his father wasn't coming home anymore. The insurance money barely covered the funeral and the leftover medical bills. Suddenly, I was the only one responsible for the mortgage, taxes, utilities, and raising a child who needed support to cope with the grief of losing his father. I didn't have a college degree, just a high school diploma and administrative assistant experience, but quitting wasn't an option, not with James depending on me. I took a full-time job at Westbrook, working from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Monday through Friday. Then I worked weekends at Rosen's store and did bookkeeping for 3 local businesses in the evenings. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Most nights, I'd collapse into bed at midnight, only to wake up at 5 a.m. to prepare James's lunch, iron his clothes, and go over his homework before heading out to work. "Mom, why do you work so much?" James asked once, his little face serious as I rushed around the kitchen on a Sunday morning, prepping for the week ahead. "Because I want you to have everything you need, honey," I said, pausing to kiss his hair. "And one day, when you grow up, I can rest a little." When I grow up, "I'll take care of you," he promised, with the seriousness that only a child can have. "You won't have to work anymore. I'll buy you a big house." I smiled at his sweet promise, though I never imagined he'd be able to keep it. I didn't raise him to be my retirement plan. I raised him to be a good man who could build his own life. Still, the memory of that promise warmed me during the long hours I spent working. As James entered his teenage years, the costs grew exponentially. He was tall, and I had to buy new clothes for him all the time. His involvement in the baseball team and the debate club also added activity fees, uniforms, and travel expenses. When his mentor mentioned that he had potential in advanced mathematics, I found a way to pay for a tutor to help him succeed, knowing that could open up scholarship opportunities. High school years passed in a blur of work, parent meetings, and sleepless nights with bills spread out across the kitchen table. I missed countless moments that other parents got to experience. The flag ceremonies, the baseball games, even the championship debate tournament. But I thought the sacrifices I was making were worth it to provide him with a stable home and opportunities for the future. James graduated valedictorian of his class. As I watched him speak in his blue graduation gown, the pride in my chest felt like it could push back the whole world. He got a scholarship to Northeastern University in Boston, not a full scholarship, but enough to cover it with student loans and my continued support. "Boston," I repeated, calculating the 3-hour drive from Mapleton. "That's great, sweetheart. I always knew you'd do great things." "The salary's better than I thought for a first job, but the best part is I'll be able to help you," he went on, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "You can cut back on working weekends." I waved off his concern. "Don't worry about me. Focus on building your career and paying off your student loans first, okay?" The truth was, I had hoped he would find a job closer to home. The house felt so empty without him, but parents don't raise their kids to fulfill their needs. We raise them to follow their dreams, even if those dreams take them far from us. James did well in Philadelphia. Every time we talked, he had news about a project he was leading or praise from his boss. I listened with pride, even though I had to microwave my dinner alone in the evenings or fix things around the house to save on hiring a contractor. One winter, when the water heater broke, I had to use my credit card to pay for it, telling myself that James's success was worth every penny of interest. 2 years into his career, James called me with a joyful voice, unable to wait to share the news. "Mom, I met a girl. Her name's Rachel. She's amazing, funny, smart, and I think she's the one I want to marry." I laughed with happiness, unable to stop myself from feeling so proud. Months went by, and Rachel became a part of our family in every sense. I would hear about their weekend trips, their plans to buy a house, and the joy they found in each other. As James's career took off, Rachel seemed to do the same. Soon, they decided to move into a bigger apartment in the city. They had been saving up, and I could hear the excitement in James's voice when he called to tell me they were looking at homes. But over time, I noticed a subtle shift. The calls became less frequent, the updates fewer. I assumed it was just the natural course of things. They were busy with work and settling into their new life. But something felt off. I was no longer the first person James turned to when he had news to share, and when I did hear from him, it was only about the house they were buying or some event they were attending. One day, I received a letter in the mail from James and Rachel. They were planning to move me into an assisted living facility. It wasn't an easy decision, but they felt that the old house was no longer a safe place for me. My health had deteriorated, and they believed it would be better for me to have the support I needed. It was a letter full of words that tried to soften the blow, but I could feel the finality of it, as if they had already made up their minds. I tried to be understanding. I had to. They were both working professionals, and their lives were busy, but it was hard to let go of the house I had worked so hard to keep, the home that had once echoed with the sounds of James playing the piano and laughing with friends, the same home that had been a sanctuary for me after David's death. The next few weeks were a blur of packing boxes, sorting through memories, and giving away old furniture. But what stung the most was when James and Rachel started rearranging my bedroom into a nursery. I had never felt more like a stranger in my own home. "Mom, we think this will be the best for you," Rachel said one day, trying to hide her discomfort. "This place has all the amenities you need, and it'll be easier on us too." The way she spoke, so detached, made me wonder if they really understood how much this hurt. I wasn't some old woman they could just tuck away. I was still Emily Johnson, the mother who worked herself to the bone to give them both a better life. I wanted to protest, to tell them how much I still loved my home, how much I wanted to keep living independently. But the words caught in my throat. James, who had promised me that he would take care of me, was now the one leading the charge in making sure I was out of the way. It wasn't the betrayal that hurt the most. It was the coldness of it all, the way they had already made up their minds and left no space for me to express my own desires. The day they finally took me to the assisted living facility, I couldn't hold back the tears. They had packed up my entire life into boxes, and now they were driving me to a place I didn't want to be. It felt like I was being erased, like all those years of love and sacrifice had been reduced to just another chapter in their busy lives that no longer needed me. At the facility, I felt a mix of resentment and helplessness. There were other residents around me, but none of them had the same history as I did. I didn't belong there. I had given up everything for my family, and now I was a forgotten part of their lives. But as I unpacked my belongings, I found a letter from James tucked in a drawer. It was an apology, written in a way that made me realize how much he still loved me. "I'm sorry, Mom. I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't realize how much this would hurt you. I'm coming to see you soon, and we'll talk about everything." I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my pocket. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope flicker inside me. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe James hadn't completely forgotten the mother who raised him. Maybe we could find our way back to each other. As I settled into the facility, I found comfort in the small things. The warmth of the sunlight streaming through the windows, the soft hum of the air conditioning, and the occasional visit from James. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the one I had now, and somehow that felt like enough. Though the journey was not what I expected, it was one that taught me resilience. The love I gave, the sacrifices I made, and the hope I carried with me all those years had not been in vain. And maybe, just maybe, my story wasn't over yet. The days in the assisted living facility began to feel more routine. I woke up early, made my bed, and joined the other residents for breakfast. The food wasn't great, but it was enough. I spent most of my afternoons reading or watching the other residents go about their days. Some of them were old friends I'd known for years, but it was strange to be living among them, knowing that my life had once been so different. The occasional laughter, the quiet moments of companionship, they all served as a reminder of how far removed I had become from the life I used to live. I kept telling myself that this wasn't the end. It wasn't how I wanted things to be, but I had to make peace with it. There was no point in dwelling on what I couldn't change. My family had their own lives to live, and I had mine, but deep down, there was still a part of me that yearned for the connection I once had with James and Rachel. The weeks that followed felt long, but they weren't without their moments of hope. Every now and then James would visit. At first, his visits were short, and I could sense his discomfort. He had a family of his own now, and I knew that every trip to see me felt like an obligation rather than a choice. But then something changed. One day, he showed up with a small bouquet of flowers and a nervous smile. "Mom, I know it's been a while, but I wanted to check in. How are you really doing?" he asked, his voice softer than I had heard it in months. It was a simple question, but it hit me harder than I expected. How was I doing? I had been so caught up in the whirlwind of emotions, resentment, confusion, hurt, that I hadn't really stopped to think about how I was. How could I be doing? The truth was, I missed them. I missed the life we used to have. But more than that, I missed the bond we shared, the love that once seemed so unbreakable. "I'm managing," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's different here, but I'm getting by. It's just hard not having you around as much, James." He sat down beside me, and for a moment we just sat in silence, both of us unsure of what to say next. The weight of the unspoken words between us seemed almost unbearable. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said finally, his voice breaking slightly. "I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was doing what was best, but I can see now how much this has hurt you. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I held them back. I didn't want to cry in front of him, not after everything, not when he was finally reaching out, finally acknowledging the pain I had been carrying. "You don't have to fix anything, James," I said softly, "but it means everything to me that you're here now." From that moment on, something shifted between us. His visits became more frequent, and slowly I could see him trying to reconnect. He would bring Rachel along sometimes, and we'd have small conversations, just like old times. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, and in my heart, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what we had lost. But even as we began to find our way back to each other, there were still moments when the pain lingered. I would catch myself staring out the window, thinking about the life I had left behind, the house, the neighborhood, the days when I had been a central part of James and Rachel's world. But then I would remind myself that life wasn't static. Things changed, people changed, and so too could the way we loved and cared for one another. One day, James came to visit with a surprise. "I've been thinking about what you said, Mom," he began. "I know I can't undo the past, but I want to make it right. How about we take a trip together? Just the two of us. No obligations, just time to reconnect like we used to." The idea took me by surprise. A trip? Just the two of us? It had been years since we had spent time alone together, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. "That sounds wonderful," I said, my voice full of emotion. "Where are we going?" He smiled, his eyes lighting up. "I was thinking we could go back to that cabin in the mountains. You remember? The one we went to every summer when you and Dad were still together?" I nodded, the memories flooding back. It had been years, but I remembered those summers well. The hikes, the fishing trips, the evenings by the fire. It had been the happiest time in our family's life. "I'd love that," I said, smiling through the tears that threatened to fall. "I'd love to go back there with you, James." As we planned the trip, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't a perfect solution to everything that had happened, but it was a step in the right direction, a chance to heal, to reconnect, and to create new memories together. We went to the cabin a few weeks later. The air was crisp, the trees stood tall and silent around us, and the lake shimmered in the distance. It was as beautiful as I remembered, and as I walked alongside James, the weight I had been carrying for so long began to lift. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly seen, not as the mother who had grown old and was forgotten, but as the woman who had given everything for the family she loved, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hope for the future. The trip to the cabin was everything I had hoped for and more. The silence of the forest, the steady rustling of leaves in the wind, and the scent of pine in the air. It all felt like a cleansing. Just being there with James, away from the routine of the facility, away from everything that had weighed me down, brought a sense of freedom that I hadn't realized I had been craving. James had arranged everything, down to the smallest details. We stayed in the same cabin where we had spent our summers as a family years ago, the one that still held the memories of laughter and shared meals. The weather was perfect, a gentle warmth in the day and a crisp coolness at night. We spent the mornings on hikes, just the two of us, the silence between us feeling comfortable now, no longer heavy with unresolved tension. In the evenings, we sat by the fire, roasting marshmallows, talking about anything and everything. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the lake, we sat on the porch, sipping tea, watching the sky change colors. It felt surreal, how much had changed, yet how much had stayed the same. We were still here, together, after all the years and all the heartache. I never thought we'd be here again, James said quietly, his eyes on the horizon. I glanced over at him. Neither did I. But I'm glad we are. He turned to me, his expression thoughtful. I know I can't make up for everything, but I want you to know that I'm trying. I never wanted to hurt you, Mom. I just got so wrapped up in my own life, I didn't see what was happening to you. I don't want to keep making the same mistakes. His words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't that I didn't know he loved me. Of course he did. But hearing him say it so clearly, so openly, was something I had longed for. You don't have to fix everything, James, I said softly. But I'm proud of you, for being here, for wanting to try. There was a long pause, and then James smiled, a little awkwardly, but it was a smile that held so much meaning. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make everything right, but I'll keep trying. For you. And in that moment, I realized that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning to move forward, one small step at a time. It was about finding peace with what had happened, accepting that things would never be the same, but still allowing room for hope, for love, and for new beginnings. The next few days were filled with simple pleasures. We revisited the places we used to go, our favorite hiking trails, the small cafe by the lake where we used to stop for coffee. Even the quiet moments, sitting side by side, watching the birds fly over the water, felt meaningful in their own way. It was as if the weight of all that had been unsaid for so long had finally lifted, and in its place there was just a quiet understanding, an unspoken connection between us. James was more relaxed now, and so was I. The tension that had once defined our relationship was gone, replaced by something more peaceful, more genuine. We weren't pretending to be the perfect family anymore. We were just two people who had been through a lot and were willing to give each other a second chance. By the time the weekend came to an end, I felt a sense of calm settle over me, a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. It wasn't that everything was fixed, of course it wasn't, but there was a lightness in my heart that hadn't been there before. For the first time in a long time, I could imagine a future where I wasn't just the mother sitting alone in a facility, forgotten by the world. I could see a future where James and Rachel were part of my life again, where we could rebuild, step by step, what had been broken. As we packed up to leave the cabin, James turned to me, his face serious but with a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "So," he said, "what's next for us?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question, but not in a bad way. "What's next," I repeated, "is whatever we choose to make of it." We stood there for a moment, looking at the cabin, at the place that had once been a symbol of family, of love, and now, somehow, a symbol of new beginnings. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly ready to take the next step, whatever that might look like. As we left the cabin behind, driving back toward the reality of our lives, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to reconnect, for the opportunity to be here with James, with Rachel, and with myself. The road ahead might be uncertain, and there would undoubtedly be challenges, but I knew now that I wasn't walking it alone. And as we made our way back to the life we had once known, I realized that the hardest part wasn't just about forgiving or forgetting. It was about embracing the unknown, trusting in the process of healing, and knowing that sometimes the most beautiful journeys are the ones that begin after the hardest of times. The journey to rediscovering family, to finding peace within yourself. It was a long road, but for the first time, I felt like I was ready to walk it, one step at a time. The months after our trip to the cabin were filled with challenges and triumphs, both big and small. James and I, though far from perfect, had started building a new kind of relationship, one based on open communication and mutual respect. The walls that had once been between us were slowly crumbling piece by piece. Rachel, too, was beginning to understand her role in all of this. She wasn't just the daughter-in-law I had resented. She was becoming a part of my life again, and not just as a caretaker, but as a person. I began to see her not as the person who was responsible for some of my past pain, but as someone who was trying to help, trying to build something better for the future. There were days when we stumbled, when old habits crept in, or the past threatened to drag us back down. But there were also days when we laughed, really laughed, as though we had never lost touch. One afternoon, a few months after our trip, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with Rachel. We were having coffee, just talking about life. She mentioned how she had started picking up painting again, a hobby she'd abandoned years ago. It seemed like a simple conversation, but for me, it felt like a turning point. Rachel wasn't just my daughter-in-law anymore. She was becoming her own person again, a person I could admire and respect. "I used to love painting," she said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I don't know why I stopped. Maybe because life got too busy, or maybe because I thought it was silly, but it felt good to pick up a brush again, to just create something." Her words hung in the air between us. I could hear the vulnerability in her voice, and it reminded me of my own journey. I had spent so many years feeling like I had lost myself, like my worth was tied up in what others needed from me. But now, I understood there was a power in rediscovering yourself, in finding those small joys that you had once forgotten. "I'm proud of you, Rachel," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "It's not easy to rediscover something like that, but I'm glad you're doing it." She smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Thanks, Mom. I think I'm finally starting to feel like me again, too." And in that moment, I realized something profound. Healing wasn't just about fixing what had been broken. It was about rediscovering who you were in the process. It was about finding pieces of yourself that you had lost along the way and giving them room to breathe again. Later that evening, after Rachel had gone home, I found myself reflecting on the path I had taken to get to this point. It hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when I thought I couldn't do it anymore. But I had. I had found the strength to move forward, to embrace the pain and the joy, the good days and the bad. And as I sat there, looking out the window at the setting sun, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. It was a quiet peace, the kind that comes not from everything being perfect, but from knowing that you've done the work, that you've made peace with your past, and are ready to face whatever the future holds. As the years went by, our family continued to grow, both in size and in strength. There were weddings, births, and milestones. There were still tough conversations and difficult moments, but they didn't define us. What defined us was our ability to learn, to grow, and to keep moving forward, even when the road ahead seemed uncertain. And through it all, I had learned that family wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up for each other, even when it wasn't easy. It was about understanding that no one is without flaws, and yet we still have the power to love, to forgive, and to build something new from the ashes of the past. As I looked at my family now, with James, Rachel, and even my own children, I realized that the journey we had taken had brought us to a place where we could finally understand each other truly and deeply. And for that, I was more grateful than words could express. I had found my way back, not just to them, but to myself. And that was a journey I would never regret. And with that, Emily's story came full circle of pain, of healing, of rediscovery, and ultimately of the quiet, steady peace that comes when you find your way back home. As I sat in the living room, surrounded by the sounds of our growing family, I realized just how far we had come. It felt like a lifetime ago that things were strained, tense, and uncertain. Now, there was laughter in the air, kids running through the house, and James sitting beside me with a quiet smile on his face. The house was filled with warmth, not just from the fireplace, but from the love that seemed to flow between each person. It had been years since that difficult time, years since I'd begun to heal from the brokenness that had once defined my relationship with my family. And as I watched my children interact with their cousins, as I saw Rachel and James joking and teasing each other like they had never had a rift, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. We had made it. We had moved past our pain and created something beautiful together. Rachel had truly become an integral part of this family. She wasn't just my daughter-in-law anymore. She was a daughter to me in every way that mattered. She had her own quirks and strengths, and while there were times we still disagreed, those moments were now opportunities for growth rather than conflict. We had come to understand one another in ways I never thought possible, and as for James, I could see the change in him too. He had become more present, more engaged with his family, and he wasn't afraid to show his vulnerability when he needed to. There was a depth to our relationship that had not been there before, and I was finally able to appreciate him for the man he had become. "Mom, can we go to the park tomorrow?" Emily, my youngest, asked as she bounced into the room with a sparkle in her eyes. "Sure, sweetheart," I replied, smiling. "What do you want to do at the park?" "I want to ride my bike with Aunt Rachel," Emily beamed, already excited about the plans she had made. Rachel had become a role model to Emily in many ways. The two of them would often go on bike rides, go for walks in the neighborhood, or just sit and talk for hours. It warmed my heart to see the bond they had built. The relationship that had once been so fractured had grown into one that was full of care, respect, and love. As I looked at the life we had built, I couldn't help but reflect on how much I had changed. I had learned to forgive, to heal, and to love without hesitation. I had learned that family is not perfect. It is messy and complicated, and sometimes it's hard, but it is also resilient, and the power to rebuild was always there, even in the darkest moments. I had finally learned that there was no shame in healing. There was no shame in moving forward, no shame in letting go of past hurts to embrace a future of possibility. The years of struggle and pain had shaped me, yes, but they had also taught me what truly mattered. What mattered most was the people around me, the ones who showed up for me, who loved me, and who made the journey worth it. In those quiet moments at night, after the kids had gone to bed and the house settled into its usual stillness, I found myself reflecting more and more on the beauty of family. It wasn't about the grand gestures or the perfect moments. It was about the small things, the laughter, the shared memories, the times when we supported each other through challenges. I had learned to treasure those moments. I had learned to recognize them as the heartbeat of life. One summer evening, James and I stood outside on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, and the air was warm with the promise of the coming night. We didn't say much. There didn't seem to be a need for words. We simply stood there side by side, content in each other's presence. "I never thought we'd get here," James said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of the years. "Neither did I admitted, my gaze soft as I looked at him, "but I'm glad we did." He took my hand in his, squeezing it gently. "Me too." We didn't need to say anything else. The years of struggle, the pain, the anger, it was all behind us now. We had finally reached a place of peace, a place of understanding, and in that moment, I realized that the love I had for this family was the strongest force in the world. It had carried us through our darkest times, and it would continue to carry us for years to come. Life was far from perfect, but it was real, it was beautiful, and it was ours. Each day, we grew stronger together, and as I watched my family thrive, I knew deep down that the love we had for one another would be the thing that carried us through whatever came next. Through everything, we had found our way back to each other, and that, in itself, was the greatest gift of all. With that final reflection, Emily knew that her journey, her story, was still unfolding. It was a story of growth, of resilience, and of the power of family, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same strength and grace that had carried her this far.